Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have an esteemed panel with us today. Two, in particular, legends. Not that everyone else isn't a legend, but definitely Sherry and Susan are definitely legends in this space. Lots of experience in AI, AI design, AI strategy, and this session really is going to be all around conversation design and AI design, experience design, and how do we create experiences with the tools and technologies that we've been talking about for the last day and a half to make sure that those experiences are as good as they can possibly be for the users. What's interesting about conversation design or AI experience design that's unique compared to like mobile web design or anything like that is, as I mentioned in the talk I gave just a minute ago, which is that all you have is the conversation, isn't it? You don't have anything else. With a chatbot, maybe you've got a few guardrails because you've got buttons you can use or images and carousels, etc. But still, you're reliant purely on dialogue. So it requires a specific set of skills, in the words of Liam Neeson in Taken, and to utilize that effectively to create good experiences is what we're going to talk about. And so to get us started, I want to try a little bit of an experiment, if you're all right with that. Everyone fancy a bit of an experiment? Yeah? All right. Let's see if this works. So I won't be able to actually do this because I'm holding the microphone, but you'll be able to do it. Okay, right. So I have an esteemed assistant here who is going to help me with this experiment. So I'm going to count to 3, right? Can everyone see me? I'm going to count to 3, and on 3, I would like you to clap. All right? 1, 2. Why did you clap then? I didn't say 3. That was Ness's experiment, so that worked out, Ness. That was well done. So what's interesting there is, I said when I say 3, let's clap, but that you followed my behavior rather than listening to the words that I'm saying. Because as people, we don't just rely on dialogue. We've got other cues and other things that we use to take in information so that we understand what's going on and we can have a conversation. With conversational AI, we don't necessarily have all of those additional sensory inputs as we do as humans. We're left with dialogue. And as we've just explained, people find it slightly, not harder to hear, it's just that you're listening to and taking on more sensory inputs than purely just the dialogue. And especially in like a voice interface, for example, which we might get into, where the interaction and the interface is ephemeral, it's there in 1 minute, then it's gone, and you've lost it. And people don't always pay attention and listen all the time, so that gives different requirements. So anyway, we're going to get into all of that in just a moment. We're going to get into how you can use experience design and conversation design to create effective experiences. And so I'd like to introduce my panel. We have Chris here, Susan, Sherry, Ken, and Ness. I'll let you introduce yourselves a little bit more effectively than I will. We have PwC, which is Chris, Ken, Sherry, and Ness, and Kore.ai, Susan. And so maybe we'll begin with that. Maybe we'll start with you, Chris. We'll go to Susan and Sherry. Just a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to the room.
Okay. So hello. I've been a management consultant for many years in the customer experience space, and I've done a couple of stints in industry as well. And so I have helped companies think through their digital and contact center strategies as all of these new technologies have evolved over scores of years. But in the last couple of years, it's really exploded with the reach of what conversational AI can do. So I hope that I can impart some of the experiences that I've had in that time frame in this short time here.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, I'm Susan. I'm on the expert services team at Kore.ai. I am, I think, the token linguist on the panel. So I came to conversational AI through a background in linguistics, specifically speech acoustics and speech perception. I have been lucky enough to be working with speech and language technologies since the Pleistocene era, basically. Wow. Yeah. Wow. So thousands of years.
Sherry Combs. I came into AI as a distinguished engineer for IBM Watson, so I'm like old school AI. And then I went into designing contact center solutions for a company called Genpact, which, okay, so I see some nodding. So the early days of Google Contact Center AI, so I invented a thing called Neural Intelligence Platform, Neural Chat. And then I went over to Deloitte and I started up and ran their conversational AI practice for 5 years. And I joined PwC 2 years ago, and this is my team, and we're doing a lot of work. You'll hear my religion. I think a lot of people develop conversational systems, but they don't design them. So they build them to work. Quotey fingers work, but nobody wants to use them. So, because they weren't truly designed to be usable. So we're going to talk about that on the panel, but excited to be here, and hopefully we can take some questions from out here too. Okay.
Hello, I'm Ken Grafals, Senior Conversation Architect for Kore.ai. I've been working on next-gen NLP systems for about 17 years, with Kore for 2 years. So yeah, bridging the gap between business need and development with a user-centric approach.
Hi everyone, this is Nes from PwC. I am coming from originally a product management background, but I was very close to the design team, and it's my passion since I know that how much big impact it makes. So I have been focusing on experience design at PwC, and I have different experiences with Google, GM, PwC, and a couple other companies. And yes.
Fantastic. Cool. Thank you so much. You touched on something there, Sherry, which is kind of gets to the heart, I think, of things, which is that lots of people use technology to build applications and they don't think about necessarily designing them. And I think that we've saw lots of examples, I think, especially with generative AI, where that is definitely the case. It seems as though I got into this stuff with Alexa and Google Assistant and stuff like that, and so it was kind of like design was a big part of that because you're limited by the technology and what you can do and stuff like that, and so you have to design the best experience you can. With large language models, it seems as though there's a large technical community that has kind of grabbed hold of this stuff and say, oh, right, now we can build this stuff. And when you throw technology at the problem, you are left with a few things that violate, I think, a few of the conversation design principles, which we can get into. Things around, responses never end with a prompt for the next turn. They just end with a full stop, and then you're left thinking, well, okay. So maybe we can start with the role of AI experience design or conversation design, what it means, and what the value of it is. Perhaps maybe, Sherry, given that it came from you, we'll start with you, and we'll get everyone else's thoughts after that. The role of experience design and what that means. Why do you need an experience designer? Why isn't it kind of okay just to have developers and we'll build some stuff and put it out there?
Yeah, I mean, there was a quote. Now I've been around so long that it was like Gartner said by like 2023 or 2 or something. They said all the bots that have been built to date are going to be thrown out, and I've always thought and rebuilt. Right? And I've always thought, like I said, and I think I kind of already alluded to this, is that they were developed by a developer to work, but they weren't designed to be usable. So when I think of that, I think of old school IVRs. Like there's 2 things in the world that make people the most angry. It's driving and IVRs. Like there's studies that tell you that. So why would you keep putting this person through the same IVR terrible experience, right? So that's what I'm trying to get to, is that if you truly design the experience to be usable for the user and not for the technologist, because I think IVRs have been designed a lot by IT people. I call it Joe IT. Has designed the IVR, and they're not designers. Designers are very different. I'm an engineer. I'm not a designer, by the way, but I love design and I hire good designers. And so bringing that experience, I think, is critical to truly make it usable. And I'll give you an example of, and I don't want to take all the time because I want you guys to talk, of design, like somebody designing. When you call somebody to do something, think you're calling just have it be your cable company, and the first thing they ask you is, will you do a survey? And you're calling because you have a question about your bill. That is annoying. That is not design, because you're ticking the customer off the minute you're saying, will you complete a survey? That is not why they're calling to do a survey. And the first thing you're asking them, will you do a survey? That's terrible design. Terrible design. I hope nobody in here does that. That's just one example. I'm sure you guys could give 100 more examples of bad design.
Maybe I can, because you mentioned LLMs, Kane. So one of the very basic, the conversation design principles to start with is Grice's maxim, right? This is number one. So when we create conversations, we want to make sure that they are, a good amount of information, not too much, not too little. It's true, it's relevant, and it's not ambiguous. So it's clear. So with LLMs, it feels like I made these comments in a couple different places. It feels like we are in square one, back in square one, because it generates very long responses. It's what matters if customers will read those responses or not. So we still, need to make sure that how much information customers need, if they will read it, if they will not read it, if will they act on it. And as you said, turn taking is another principle you just mentioned. Call to action, every prompt needs to end with a call to action, so customers shouldn't be in a place, okay, like, should I say something, or is bot gonna tell me something? These all happen all the times, and with, generative AI, sometimes we cannot control this.
No, please.
I was just going to say, a great example of that turn taken was what I was mentioning there. Sorry, you mentioned their prompt. I was going to clear that up actually. So, it's a bit weird. In conversation design, historically, a prompt is the thing that the assistant or the bot says to the user in order to continue the conversation. Whereas with large language models and generative AI, now a prompt is the message that you give the system. So it's kind of a little bit inverted in terms of its definition. But anyway, Susan, how would you describe the role of a designer as far as in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I plus one to all of this. I think the role of conversation designers today in the world of large language models and generative AI is the same role that any user experience designer plays on any project. It doesn't matter what the technology is. The role of design is to place a laser focus on the end user. Who are the people who are going to be using this technology, interacting with it? Because, echoing back what you said, the majesty, the wonder of this new world that we're in with all of this amazing technology, the end user only experiences that through the dialogue. And here's the thing about conversation. Linguistics alert. I'm just going to tell you a few things. Conversation is what we call an overlearned behavior, meaning that it's a behavior that we all acquire at such an early point in our lives that we don't remember not being able how to do it. Moreover, we're all immersed in conversation continually throughout our lives. So what does that mean in terms of these experiences that we are going to be building? It's that all of us as humans are the expert user of this interface. We all know how to do conversation at the highest level of expertise. We have, to do that, internalize a huge set of rules, norms, conventions. Grice's maxims are one piece of it, but that's like the tip of the iceberg in terms of how we interact. Now, we don't sit around computing in our heads like, I wonder what rule I should obey when I answer Kane's questions here. That's not how it works at all. The way it works is conversation, everything is fine until somebody breaks one of those rules. And that's the spot where it can be the best tech in the world. But if you violate your users' deeply held expectations about how a conversation should unfold, you're losing the promise of the technology then.
So what I would add to all of this is these folks have been adding some really smart nuggets about what conversational design is. What I'll add in is, how do you set up your team for success when building conversational design? First of all, you're gonna need people like this, because for the most part, your department, Joe IT, which I really like Joe IT, so let's
You are Joe IT.
I am a little bit. But the people that have been running your customer experience platforms have traditionally been working on IVRs or very rudimentary chatbots that are basically visual IVR. So when you have to think now about the next generation of what we're trying to do. It's a whole new world, so you're going to need expertise. The other thing I would add is build out that, what did you say? It's about the customer, right? What are you trying to accomplish? Who are these people? And let's make sure that we build it for those people. Build that set of guidelines. With one of my previous engagements, we were building for a senior citizen crowd. So we were talking about how fast or slow should this go, or in the first iteration, this will be the customer experience is paramount. And what that said was we were not going to repeat a single question. If they failed at any point, straight to an agent, right? And one more thing I'll add is like these, make these lessons. These are the guardrails we'll use as we attend building this. And one of the most important ones I think is don't try to trick your customer. This stuff is not a person. It is a digital assistant. Tell them up front, hi, I'm your digital assistant. I'm going to try to help you. If I can't, I'm going to get you to someone who can. Really important. Now they will engage, but why is it really important? Because next time they have a problem, if they didn't get it solved up front, at least they got to the place they needed to go. They're going to come back to the digital assistant and start there again. So just a couple of nuggets that I thought I would share.
I'll add something about what you just said. I think we know we need designers, but how many of you have truly had a good designer on your team design something, and then you get some senior executive that doesn't truly appreciate design and come in and say, well, why aren't we changing it to that? Or you need to say that. And nobody's done user research or user testing. They just think they know, and they totally take the design and flip it. And then when you present it, why don't we use that voice or this voice? And you guys, we have to have a culture of appreciating design. And I believe it's going to take all of us to change the culture. And we have to get the executives to trust that there is a purpose for design and that good design matters. And it's not just what they think, because they can speak, right? So that was the first thing. And then I was going to say, one of the things I love to talk about is personalization in design, and I was going to give an example because you used age. One of the things I built about 5 years ago, and I spoke about this at reInvent, so sorry if you've heard this, but you jam somebody into an IVR, every single person gets the exact same experience. So what we were able to do is we were able to hook the front end with Salesforce and understand who the customer was. So if at the time, and some people say this is ageist, and it could be considered that way, but we knew people that were over 80 years old, they looked at technology quite differently, especially 5 years ago. So what we would do if we knew it was an older person coming into our bill bot, we would slow down. We would use a male voice because we did research. We knew they wanted a male voice. They didn't want a female voice. We would use gentrified language. We would repeat. And we would take 4 minutes and 15 seconds to pay a bill. If that was a millennial, and we knew a millennial was coming into our solution, we gave them a 1 minute experience, a female voice. We jammed it through with brevity. 2 totally different experience, exact same process. Both were happy with their experience, and you got the same result. And they didn't go out to a live agent, and they paid their bill, but 2 totally different experiences, 4.5 minutes versus a minute, right? So that's just one example of how you can use it for age.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned age.
Interesting. Who is a designer here? A show of hands. Who is responsible for the design of the experience of their? Yeah. Okay, that's good. Well, okay, that's good. That's what I was hoping actually, because I think that this conversation then becomes increasingly more relevant, which is that. Because, as you mentioned, Susan, everyone can talk. Everyone in this room is more than capable of having a conversation with everyone else in this room. There is then this, as you mentioned, Sherry, everyone kind of has an opinion. And so designers, not just conversation designers, but designers generally, all designers have always had to, I suppose, fight for their place, seat at the table, always had to justify their decisions, even copywriters in some degree, because everyone can write, so everyone has an opinion on what something should say. And so it's always been that kind of challenge of trying to not necessarily just have people respect designers and let them get on with it, but really the designers being, I suppose, part of the practice is to develop that kind of evidence to say that this is why it's this way, and this is why we're doing it that way. Because people can't help but anthropomorphize. For example, Alexa, we call it she or he, depending on the voice, because we're so accustomed to having conversations that we just kind of think that everything, our expectations of that conversation have risen because we know what it's like to have a conversation, kind of thing. So, wonder if we can get into some of that. How do you, as a designer, design experiences, maybe Ken, we can maybe bring you in for this, would be, and Ness, would be interested to get your thoughts. How do you approach that kind of evidence-based design or kind of customer-first design? How do you kind of prove that your design outlines or suggestions or whatever are the things that actually should make it into the product?
Sure. Well, if you can afford it, doing user experience research is the best way. Putting your bot in front of real people and observing and taking notes and getting their thoughts on it. It also helps to just have a lot of experience building a lot of bots for different clients and just having just sort of the evidence from experience to know how users will react and respond to different kinds of prompts.
Wait, I just want to say, Ken, talk to us about documenting the way an assistant might interact with the end user. So talk to us about the conversational style guide.
Right. Yeah. It's a great way. One of the best ways to start the design for a project really is to start with the users. Start with a user experience approach. Understand your user personas, and document that thoroughly. Talk to subject matter experts and the business, and then start developing a style guide. Right. Usually in these projects, you've got a lot of different folks writing the content for your bots, and it's important to keep that consistent. One way to keep everyone on the same page is doing what really copywriters do in other industries, is developing a style guide, a comprehensive style guide outlining your voice and tone, the personality for the bots, and that keeps people on the same page. You can also use that style guide as the basis for prompt engineering. If you're doing Gen AI, you can really just copy paste a lot of that content, and you'll find the Gen AI bots will respond with that voice and tone.
And so, do you call it a style guide? Do you call it personality design? Do you call it persona design, or is it style guide?
We call it different things. A bot personality style guide is what we call it sometimes.
Do you have a similar approach, Ness?
I would like to add the previous question, how we prove. We do user testings. Before we go into implementation, we do Wizard of Oz type of testing. So Wizard of Oz testing, sometimes we call WOZ testing. Basically, Wizard is the someone who act like a bot, like an IVR or chatbot. User may or may not know that they're interacting with a real person or not. So we observe user behavior. Sometimes, for example, in a recent example that during our testing, we revealed customers that they are going to be tested for voice interaction, and they will be actually talking with a real person, not a bot. But we are telling prompts that we design. So if user anywhere asks that, am I supposed to say like my password here? So those kind of behaviors reveal that it is not clear for users how to follow through. So basically, we collect data based on user testing. So that just proves if it works or not.
Yeah. What about, has anybody had any experience with multivariate testing in terms of kind of, the thing that, if you have the tools to do this, it can be beneficial, which is that, let's say that most of the time it's either there's two ways of doing something, two ways of saying something, two ways of presenting information. Should we use a carousel here? Should this just be text? Or, should this be a voice thing? Should we text? So whatever it might be. And essentially running a multivariate test, as you would do with a website, where you've got two different web pages, two slightly different designs, and you want to see which design has the better impact. You can kind of run similar kind of studies, which then gets you out of having the debate opinion-based. I wonder if you can share anything about that, Susan.
Yeah, I think that can be the most powerful kind of user testing to conduct, because, listen, you can put an experience, whether it's simulated like in a WOZ test, or whether they're interacting with an actual bot that has already been developed, and you can ask people, how easy was that to use? Did it offer things that you needed. So you can ask people that, and in the abstract, like if they hate it, they'll tell you. But most of the time people are like, yeah, that was all right. Because they don't understand what the alternative might be. So what I like to say is that customers have a hard time imagining what the better alternative might be. So when you give them a couple of different experiences and they can observe for themselves, like, oh, it could be like that. Oh, yeah, clearly that's the one I want, or clearly that's the one I do not want. What we're doing is we're giving them the ability to see what the options might be, right? And it can be way more, you can move much faster. You can get to super valuable insights much faster, I think, that way. That's been my experience.
Yeah, and I'm not a designer, I'm an engineer. As an engineer, think about before the conversation, during the conversation, and after the conversation. So before the conversation, what digital insight do I have on that user? What's the legacy with my company? That's going to give you a lot. Like, they know who we are or they don't. Like, if you call your bank and they ask you a ton of questions and you've been banking there for 30 years, it really makes you angry, right? So know the legacy of the customer. So before, who am I speaking with? During, since, respond, sentiment analysis. There's tonal analysis. Older people lose hearing in certain frequencies. So you speak in a frequency for an older person that's different. That kind of thing, sensing and responding during. And then after, how did I do? Did I achieve my business outcomes? And how do I inform the next conversation? All that machine learning from the A/B testing or whatever kind of testing you want to do, that's the true result is, did we achieve what we were trying to achieve? Did we get our bill paid? Did we help the customer? Did they leave happy, mad, sad? So that's before, during, and after the conversation, gathering as much data, digital insight as you can. That's what informs the next conversation. So think of it as a loop.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into the analytics side of things in a second, without a doubt. That use case there of the personalization use case, and Chris, you mentioned it, which is that, and Sherry mentioned it as well, which is that, like, for example, older people, the voice slows down, it's easier to comprehend. I don't know if you're familiar with Heidi Culbertson, I know you know Sherry, who had a platform, I think it was called Ask Marvy or something, wasn't it? I think it was Marvy. Yeah, and it was for like a senior living support kind of company, and it was there to help people that were in retirement facilities, and they could talk to Alexa, and they could find out what's happening in their area, and they could send messages to their children or whatever. And it was a really great platform, and that was exactly the research that she found from going to residential homes and doing usability testing with the actual users of the product, was that Alexa's typical cadence was far too fast. Yes. They had to slow it down. So they're responding to real user behavior. And that became a principle for designing for, the elderly, if you like, which is seniors. Let's slow the voice down. Are there any other things like that you've experienced in your experience and your sort of time of designing these applications? Any other sort of like little nuggets of advice like that, oh, we tried this and this definitely works?
Okay. Because I was gonna double down on what you talked about in terms of using what you know about the person that you are interacting with. This is not just a thing for bots. This is something you can experience with different live customer service agents, right? Imagine the difference between, the agent picks up and they're like, hi, how can I help you? Like, I have no clue who you are. I have no clue about your relationship with my company. And you're treated as just anyone. Versus the experience where I say, hi, Kane, I notice you have a flight coming up this weekend. Is that what you're calling about? Which one of those is more intelligent? That is not intelligence, like, that's not conversational intelligence per se. That is using the information you have about your users to deliver them the relevant experience, right? So that's the maximum of relation. It's actually breaking the rules of conversation that especially if you're a bot and you can see the number they're calling from and you can see that phone number is in your customer database, to be like, hello, I have no clue who you are. Let's continue. That right there can degrade people's trust in the automation.
If you can say their name. If you can pronounce their name. Because if you don't pronounce it properly, it doesn't help. But the thing I was thinking of is a lot of it, I saw this years ago, we had designers and they recommended a name for a conversational bot. And we were talking about, should it be male, should it be female? And they said, well, let's just make it androgynous. We did research, and there's tons of research out there. I call it PAT, because you don't know if it's a man or a female. But tons of research. If people do not know the gender of the bot, they think it's creepy and they won't speak to it. Well, you don't know that unless you're really a designer or you've done testing, right? So that's creepy. I can't tell what I'm speaking to. I'm not going to talk to it. So things like that, those mistakes that we've seen over and over and over, I think we need to create like a lessons learned book. You have to pick the gender of your bot so people can know how to relate to the bot, or they're not going to interact with it. At least that's the way it was 3 years ago. It may have changed recently. I'm not sure.
And don't
But
you think that's going to change, though, as we move forward with technology? Like, I don't think it's going to bug Gen Z kids nearly
Right.
as much.
yeah, it might have
Right?
changed. Yeah.
So a couple of things on that. One, we're not quite there yet that we're going to be able to sort out who's coming in exactly and maybe changing the voice. I mean, well, yes, but that's kind of, let's get this thing up and running at a baseline.
Deployed it for Fortune 9.
Yeah, exactly, but not everybody's there yet. Not everybody's
Right, right,
CRM
right.
applications are dippable. I mean, let's be honest. So that's one of the rules too. Is like, don't over club this thing. Do what you know you can do, and then get the call to an agent if you have to. Only do what you can do, because again, what we want to do is we want to make people not okay, but want to engage digital first with the technology, get done what they can get done, but then know that they're going to get to somebody who will resolve
Right channel,
their
right
issue.
time.
Yeah, and so it's just be careful about that. Is the best practice. Yeah, you've done it for somebody, but I've seen it fail 100
for sure.
times too.
That's true.
And then what happens is the program blows up. Like, why does Kore have a chief design officer? Why does PwC sit here and tell you, you need to have designers? Because we want your project to succeed. If you don't succeed and it blows up, people are going to be, just go back to the way it was. So it's important to succeed. And secondly, this stuff lives and breathes. You don't do design once. You are iteratively doing design. We're keep learning, keep getting better. So build that muscle. Use help, like, a vendor, a trusted source, but build that muscle internally too. But don't be afraid to keep coming back for a little more help, because we need the business.
What would be, that's a good point actually, which is that we've spoken a lot now so far about all of that kind of upfront design work that goes into creating these assistants and making them successful. But as you said, when they go live, they don't, it's not like a website where you can just push the button and forget about it. It's now live. I liken it more akin to, you've now just hired a 5-year-old child, and your job when you go live, actually going live, is the beginning of things, not the end of things as it is with a normal project. And your job now is to rear that child, make it more intelligent, get it better and better, expand what it can do. So maybe we can touch on that. Maybe Ken and Ness, you can share some thoughts in terms of, for those that are not from the design kind of background, what are the typical, I suppose, operational things that a designer would do?
Yeah, well, totally agree. I mean, once you deploy your virtual assistant into production, a lot of times that's when the job starts, right? Then you're really seeing what the user utterances are. You're seeing what your users need. You can talk to as many subject matter experts and stakeholders as you want. Everyone thinks they know what their users are going to say. But you deploy your app and you start listening to the calls, and you'd be surprised how often you'd be like, oh, I didn't expect that they'd need this or say that. And so then, so it really is an iterative approach of identifying those intents, discovering new business, new use cases based on what folks are saying, and iterating that way.
Ness, any thoughts in terms of what you should be doing on an ongoing basis once something's live?
That's, beside what Ken said, continuous monitoring, right? Like how user behaviors change. Is there any dropouts happening? And if that dropout's happening, is it because of a poor design, or was there a bug? What is the reason? And if customers leave, do they come back from another channel or do they just left? Is there a follow-up system with those customers? So all those, this is just a part of the monitoring. And beside, what Ken said, for monitoring all those utterances, because sometimes, we all speak very differently and we mean something else when we say things. So are we capturing those utterances within that intent so that next time customers, of course, we cannot, pick like one or two things, but if there are things that we missed, so that will also help us to improve our, NLU recognition.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I think one of the lovely things that while we try to get a handle on this before, when we're in the earliest design phases, one of the things that I think is really key that you can discover once you are in production and have real people interacting with your bot is it reveals some of their cross-channel journey with your organization, right? There's this temptation for people to think about, well, this is my conversational AI solution, as if it is on an island and unconnected with all of the other customer service options that you are providing to your users, right? But it's not. And it's really only when you get, when you're able to observe what's happening in production that you say, oh, we're getting all of these calls into the bot where people are saying, you sent me that email, right? And so it can be something that your organization has done. It can be some event that's completely external to your organization that can be driving them to try something on the mobile app and it's failed, or so I think that's one of the nice things, that it's bigger than just your conversational AI bot that you can discover once you go out there into live production.
It's super complicated now because they talk to an IVR, and then they come in, and most people have a universal bot, and then they talk to this other bot, and then they talk to an agent, and none of them are rarely are they linked. So it's even more complicated than I think it was years ago when you just had the IVR. So it's gotten
very
really
few
messy.
companies have this sort of infrastructure in place that it's able to really understand that journey, isn't it? Because someone might call you today, maybe they don't get the issue resolved, so they go back on the website tomorrow, they talk to a chatbot, and the chatbot gives them a link to a web page, and they go to that web page and then can't find the answer, then they call again, and stitching together what that experience actually looks like in practice is a very difficult, challenging thing to do. And actually only when you do that can you figure out, in some cases, if your chatbot is even effective. So if a lot of people will begin with their conversational AI from the perspective of kind of like deflecting contact. So the first, as you were saying, Chris, get up and running. Let's kind of prove the value of this thing. And one of the easiest things to do is to say, okay, we know what you're talking about. Best thing to do is go to this web page, or best thing to do is go there, deflecting to the resources. Yeah, and then you will kind of graduate above that, and you'll get to a place where you want to try and answer questions that are more personalized. So you might retrieve information from a system or whatever, and then you graduate from that, and now you're pushing data into a system and retrieving data from a system. Now you're transacting, and then you might graduate from that to get to a stage where you're doing things that humans couldn't do. Even if you had a whole bunch of them, transformative kind of use cases. But those things are harder to do if you can't really visualize or get the data on how effective your chatbot is. If you send them a link to something, like to make a payment, do they make a payment? Has your chatbot actually been effective? Can you monitor whether the payment was made or not, and then assign that back to the chatbot and say it was the chatbot that generated that revenue? So these are all the kind of things that if you're designing the experience, you're thinking about all of those different touch points in that whole journey. I want to throw it open for some questions to everybody, but first, yeah, go on.
One thing I want to say, my team always hears me say this thing, but I want to challenge the vernacular a little bit. We have been talking about containment and deflection in contact centers forever. This technology and these capabilities, we should not be talking about deflecting a customer or containing them. We're digitally resolving their issue. We're engaging with them. Let's not shortchange the technology, and let's definitely not insult the customer to say we're going to contain you or deflect you. I know we're used to saying those words, but we've got to change the vernacular because the technology is there.
Yeah. The containment one is a bugbear for sure because it's very easy to contain people, which is you just never answer the never answer the question, never give them out to an agent. Job done. Resolution is have you helped them and have you resolved an issue? So have you helped them by answering a question, or have you resolved an issue by actually helping them get stuff done? Definitely. We've got a question, DK.
Right. Yeah, we're working on a paper right now. We call it a hybrid architecture, where where you understand when you don't use the AI is really important. Like no AI, AI, conversational AI, add a P, API, LLMs or not, right? So I think that we will be designing architectures that certain parts of the conversation use certain things. And you're only going to use Gen AI for, I think, very specific, well-contained parts of your conversational AI, because of the reasons you said. And I think that compliance and security is going to restrict a lot of what we can and can't do with Gen AI, to be honest. So like if you're going to summarize, or you're trying to make the conversation more stochastic, or you're trying to make it, like, give it some flair, you would use it. If you're using it to search large amounts of data, you would use it, right? But you would contain that conversation to only components where you're going to use that innovation to make it a good experience. So you're not going to. I get the question, and I would love for you to talk to others about this too, is just, Sherry, can't you just use Gen AI? It can figure out the intent, and just use that. You don't need all this conversational AI design. I get that question every single day, and it is not easy. It is not easy.
Do you see a timeline within this year where we can sort of jointly go to clients with a framework where we can go to their legal teams, compliance teams, saying that, look, this is what we can do?
Who wants to take that one?
Well, I
Bryce.
think that this goes to that discussion of the language models, right? Are you going to use a large language model? Yeah.
A small language.
Yeah.
Let's say
Yeah.
a client use 10 billion parameter like what we were talking about. Then I can message that. Can we figure out a tactical way of implementing this within this year? Because there are a lot of people very interested.
Yeah.
And it does reduce the time of development significantly, maintainability also significantly. But how do we get to a point where we can actually use it? For banking, I guess we can use it for
Yeah.
retail. I guess we can use it for travel. Some of the less regulated industries.
We're using it for some of our clients, like for
Generation of that actual.
not necessarily generation of spoken word or,
Exactly.
But there's a difference, DK, don't you think, between you using it? What I hear in your question is using the AI to generate responses at runtime. So nothing pre-scripted, just hand it all completely over to the bot. I think we'll get there. I know we'll get there, right? But for right now, I think I'm in alignment with Sherry that we need to choose carefully where that's the right strategy. Listen, there's plenty of use cases, I think, even in a financial services world, where you could use it. But if you are taking a payment, or if you are reading out a policy, or but
I agree, but I think like even some welcome messages based on like sentiment, and like there'll be a lot of concern and validation required of we're not coming up with some words which are not right. I'm just thinking.
banking is
Yeah.
regulated, so that's not.
It's going to be use case by use case, I think, in a lot of respects. Yeah.
Second related question is, often get this question around sounding very robotic. Okay, so I mean, what are you guys like? Give us some good practices on like.
I want to say something I have totally taken a beautiful voice because a lot of people think, oh, the more human-like it sounds, the better people are going to use it. And I've used Creepy Justin. He's an AWS voice. He sounds like a creep. More people responded to that than any other voice. So when people say it has to sound human-like, it has to sound like a human, it is not a human. So sometimes you take it the other way to the creepy robotic voice, and you get people listen better, like clap 1, 2, 3. They clap before they heard 3. They're not listening. But if you do a creepy voice or an interesting voice, they'll listen, and you might get a better response. All that user research and testing will tell you, but it's not accurate to think just because it sounds more human-like that it's better.
I don't know, I'm an engineer like you, so
Yeah,
Yeah.
I learned that one the hard way.
I think what we're kind of hearing here is that what ultimately matters is what creates for the best interface, isn't it? Yeah. Because if you can create a good interface that works well, then you'll get the outcomes. And I think the generative AI question is a very good question and a pertinent question because, there's lots of different use cases you can use it for. You could use it for classifying the intents. You could use it for retrieving data. You could use it for summarizing, conversations. You can use it for generating responses. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can use it for. It's about trying to find, as you said, where does it work best? And, go back 12 months and the conversation design community was kind of thinking, well, what's the future of conversation design then? Maybe Ness and we'll bring you in here and say, well, the future of conversation design, if we were to believe one train of thought, is that large language models are going to be fundamentally capable of solving all of our conversational problems hooked up to some APIs and we can all kind of go home and the conversation designer job isn't the same or is not needed. What do you envisage? Is that statement at all correct? What's the future of conversation design in a world of large language models and generative AI?
I think, first of all, I don't think that conversation design is going anywhere. I actually think that the impact and importance of it is increasing, but it will evolve, of course. Like as we have maybe small language models, like action-based language models. Some people are now calling those models like that. So it will become. It will evolve. It will change, but somebody needs to design experience. So I think. That's, of course, what I think. Personally, it will more like a holistic AI experience, where customers is coming to us when, through which channel, and should we include AI, Gen AI, conversational AI. So I think conversation designers, or no AI, yes, or simple automation, I don't know. But I think what I, anticipate is conversation designer's role will become more holistic AI designer, or like an all-channel designer. So that's what I think.
What does everyone else think? Is generative AI changing the role for conversation designers? If it's making them more important, what's it impacting them? What's it changing?
I think it introduces prompt engineering into the practice. I think that's a big part. I was talking about a style guide. Being able to write something like a style guide for the Gen AI prompt is important. Also, you need to understand the business and your users in order to put that into the Gen AI prompt as well. You need to give it context in order to get responses you're looking for.
I want to hear what the linguist has to say, but I'll say that I see a future where we're going to start to have the generative AI kind of augment and help the conversational designer as it learns. But
Well, yeah. I mean, we do that all the time. You use generative AI in our design practice to generate options for us. As you said, there's almost always more than one way to say it, and you can use generative AI at design time to generate the options for you with response rephrasing, things like that. But it doesn't remove the job of it. I think that what large language models and Gen AI give us is another set of tools that, as Ken said, we're going to need to build new practices, new techniques, new methods, but it's one more tool for us to deliver amazing experiences to end users. But like I said at the beginning, the job of UX designers in conversation or anywhere else is to have that laser focus on the end user and make sure that the experience is awesome.
Perfect. Any final thoughts on that, Sherry?
No, I was just thinking of a formula. NLP equals NLU plus NLG. So natural language processing, sorry you guys, engineer again, it equals natural language understanding and natural language generation. And we've had the understanding for a long time, and now we can generate, and we're trying to figure out exactly what you were thinking of, how to generate, how to use it to generate. And you need both. You need to listen and speak. So you can generate, you can understand, and you need both. And that's...
Two more quick points on DKs. Look, you really shouldn't have hallucinations in production, but you will. I mean, most of you probably read about the Air Canada bot that made the mistake on the bereavement, and that was horrible, right? But so what that says is, hey, get your data right, okay? Your data's got to be right. It doesn't matter what your design is, it's going to be flawed. But the second thing is before we get into trying to solve generative AI use cases, let's think of, like a business to consumer company that has 3.5 million billing calls a month. Let's solve that first. Get the data right and solve that first. That doesn't take too much cognitive ability. Unless, though, there's another side to that. There are companies, I worked for one back in the day, where we were very selective about how we penalized the company. And you guys have done it before, even yourself. If you call Amex, you're a little late or whatever, a mischarge, and they're like, we're going to take that off because you're a good customer. Are we going to entrust that level of empathy to the generative AI yet? Maybe, maybe not. But it's important to think about because the customer experience, right, and the customer relationship are really key.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Can we have a round of applause for our panel, please?